Welcome to Mindful School Marketing, your go-to podcast for personal and professional growth.
We're school marketers, business owners, and moms passionate about connecting other school professionals with tools and strategies for success.
We love solving problems, exploring new ideas, and thinking outside the box. Let's transform your school and life starting right now.
Welcome to Mindful School Marketing. I'm Tara Clays.
And I'm Aubrey Bursch. Today, we're joined by Brett Cooper and Evans Kerrigan of Integris Performance Advisors. Brett and Evans help professionals build work relationships that really work. Over the last 20 years, they've influenced thousands of people in government, nonprofit, and corporate America to work together in more productive, more effective, and more human ways. Both of our guests are widely recognized thought leaders and popular speakers on team dynamics, leadership, and operational excellence. Their keynotes always leave audiences inspired and ready to make a real impact. Welcome.
Thank you, Aubrey. Glad to be here.
We're so excited you're here. We're really glad that you joined us, and we can't wait to get started hearing more about what you do. So tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're really excited to be here with you two as well. So I'm Brett of the two. Evans is the other guy there on the screen. I'll give everybody an introduction to who we are. So Evans and I have actually been working together for almost 20 years at this point. We started back with another organization when we were working on Lean Six Sigma process improvement kind of consulting. So we were helping organizations with their process improvement efforts, balanced scorecard efforts, and things like this. And we did really good projects with that and had a lot of fantastic outcomes with that. But one thing that we realized a number of years into doing that work is that something was missing. And that thing that was missing was a focus on teams, on leadership, on emotional intelligence. And so what we decided to do was back in 2011, we decided to start a new organization. That's how we came up with Integris Performance Advisors. We started this new organization to help organizations that wanted to do all that continuous improvement kind of strategy work, but they wanted to do it in a way that allowed them to really make changes to the culture of the organization. So we've essentially blended the ideas around Lean Six Sigma, process improvement, continuous improvement, with ideas around emotional intelligence, team dynamics, leadership effectiveness. That's really how Integris was born. And now we're going on 10 years with that organization. And really excitingly, we just last year, at the end of last year, one good thing that came out of the pandemic was we were able to release a book that we wrote called Solving the People Problem, which kind of chronicles a lot of what Evans and I have learned together over these last 2 decades of doing the kind of work that I was explaining.
Well, first of all, congrats on your book. That sounds amazing. I can't wait to dive into it. I'd love to hear more about emotional intelligence and the continuous improvement. How do you define those terms, and how do you see them applying to work relationships?
Sure. I'll go ahead and get started, and then Brett, you can hop in with whatever you want to add in on this. I'll start with the continuous improvement side, because that's kind of where we started as an organization as well. And continuous improvement's been around for a long time and under a lot of different names. When I got started a long time ago, it was actually total quality management was very popular in the United States. Since then, it's been Lean, it's been Six Sigma, it's Agile. But all of them really kind of boil down to some very simple ideas, which is how can we better serve our customers? And in our case, in your case, this might be the parents of people who might send students our way. And how can we get better outcomes while managing our resources? So how can we become both more effective and more efficient? So we've been doing that work for quite a while. And I got started in the TQM world back in the 1990s. I think it was the 90s. I don't think it goes as far back as the 80s. I think it was beginning in the 90s. And one of the things that we saw is we were working on business processes. One of those things that we talk about all the time in continuous improvement is it's not the people, it's the process. And you can have great people on your staff, but if your processes are bad, it really makes it difficult for them to perform at their best. So we worked on business processes. Brett said we had some really great things. We saved huge amounts of money. We got much better outcomes for organizations around projects we were doing. But we weren't talking about a couple of processes that we found really affected everything in the organization. And those are the processes of how we led one another how we communicated with one another, and how we work as teams. And all of those processes really get tied together around the idea of improving our emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is an idea that's been around. You can go back into ancient writings, but really we talk about emotional intelligence. We're really looking at those last 30 years. And what it is it's how do we better interact with one another so that we can be successful? So it's a really simple process to understand at that level. It's not as easy to actually make the changes that we need to make. And that's what we saw as really a gap for organizations we were working with. So we started kind of helping them to better build their self-awareness around who we are and how we're interacting, as well as their awareness of others in the organization. And it's about both awareness and then how do we apply that to get better at interacting with one another. And some of the stuff that's important around emotional intelligence is a lot of studies have been done that have shown that it has twice the impact on a person's career that their base intelligence or their IQ or their technical skills is actually going to have on what they're able to accomplish. It's how we work with one another that's really that critical, we would say essential skill for moving forward.
Yeah, and if I can just add one thing that emotional intelligence is not, we are not saying that when you become a more emotionally intelligent, you're becoming more emotional. This is not about, touchy-feely, soft skills kind of thing. This is really, as Evans was just outlining, it's about, do you understand how you communicate? Do you understand how other people like to communicate? And do you use that knowledge to really adapt, how you come across to the world? So anybody who thinks emotional intelligence, ooh, that's touchy-feely stuff. Yeah, no, it's not at all.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And what I really love about what you both have said, especially what Evans just went over, the idea of awareness, which really is related to the topic of mindfulness, which is what we kind of talk about, is approaching your daily responsibilities mindfully, whether you're working in a school or anywhere else, or whether you're home with your family. Mindfulness is something that we're paying a lot of attention to, and it's perhaps an overused term, but it's really applicable here. And the idea of being mindful about your relationships with other people and how you work and how they work and how you can best work together. I know that you use something called the DISC, and we've talked about, Evans and I talked about that before we recorded, and I've done the DISC survey, and I'd love to have you tell our audience a bit more about that, what it is and how it's used.
Sure. I can give you a little background on DISC. DISC is a personality styles, communication styles assessment. Now, there are a ton of personality and style assessments out there. And quite honestly, we think most of them are pretty powerful for different reasons. People have probably heard about Myers-Briggs or MBTI, or maybe Enneagram. I know you guys have had another show about Enneagram, which is a fantastic tool. The reason that we like DISC for the work that we do is that DISC is really focused on helping people understand, how can I communicate more effectively? It's a behavior-based kind of an assessment. It's observable behavior, and it's something that teams can really easily use. If you know your own DISC style and you know the DISC styles of other people on your team or other people that you're interacting with in the workplace, you have a cheat sheet basically of what you can do to immediately start to be more effective when you communicate with other people. So, question, what is DISC? DISC is actually an acronym. It's D for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for conscientiousness. These are the four main personality styles that exist in the general population. The theory and the science around DISC actually dates back to the 1920s. So we're almost 100 years in to the research on this. And over the course of that 100 years, the tools that use the model have evolved a great deal. So the DISC assessment that we use now is probably the most advanced, scientifically advanced computer adaptive testing. It's the most kind of robust approach to getting a DISC assessment that we've ever had an opportunity to do. So what we're able to do with DISC is we look at how people essentially behave and come across to the world. So DISC measures two different spectrums. First, it measures how fast-paced or reserved are you? And then it also looks, the second spectrum is it looks at how accepting or skeptical are you? So if you think about those two spectrums, anybody who's listening can probably say, all right, on the grand scheme of things, I think I'm probably either a little bit more fast-paced or maybe I'm a little bit more reserved. And they can probably say, I'm a little more accepting of new ideas. When someone comes to me and says, hey, what do you think of this idea? I think that's great. Let's talk it through. That's fantastic. Or do I say, you better show me some more about that. Show me the money. I need some details about that. But those are the two spectrums that DISC looks at. And by asking a series of questions, where the DISC assessment is essentially able to kind of identify where you fall on that DISC map and scopes out, are you mostly a D, an I, an S, or a C type personality? And along with that comes all kinds of fantastic insights.
I am just intrigued by the DISC. I've heard so much about it, yet never really experienced it. And so hearing you talk about that was quite interesting. Now, as you know, our podcast really talks about mindfulness. And I'm really curious, how could a school use the DISC, and how does mindfulness apply to how the DISC can help teams and administration? For example, hiring, team dynamics, et cetera, like that.
Oh, it helps in a multitude of ways. If we really think about it, we're looking at DISC, and DISC is a wonderful way to actually get a much deeper level of self-awareness about yourself, about what are the things that might stress you, what are the things that might make it easier for you to work, as well as the people around you. And in terms of mindfulness, what we're really trying to say is, how can I better interact with the world around me? And that starts with building that self-awareness. So DISC provides a wonderful insight into self-awareness. The other thing that it actually does is it gives us a language to explore with others about our differences. One of the things that we say frequently in the book and frequently with our clients is a great deal of emotional intelligence is, how do I better honor the differences that we have? All too often in human communications, we think about the way I communicate and the wrong way to communicate. And that's just not real. We just all have different ways of communicating. And in reality, the only way we really grow is by being able to hear the other perspective. So in terms of how teams and schools and any kind of a group actually work better, if we can start to better understand those styles, because there's not a right and wrong style. All the styles are equally valuable, and you are perfect wherever you are. But if we can't honor the other styles, it's going to cause difficulty, it's going to cause friction, it's going to make all of our interactions more difficult. So we got into it because when we were working with continuous improvement teams, we found those communication challenges getting in our way. But it works for any group. And I'm working right now with a team that's actually kind of digging into this deeply because they've had problems for several years. And the insights they're getting, it's almost become humorous. In several cases, people who have really been at loggerheads for quite a while have gotten into the DISC tool, and they're kind of laughing about, oh, you don't dislike me. You just have a different way of approaching this. Because we all start to put baggage into our conversations about, if you're acting that way, here's what I think you must mean. When frequently it's just, we have a different way of approaching things. We have a different way of communicating. So taking off the guilt and weight about having to communicate, it lets us actually get to the issues we need to be able to discuss and to better honor one another from whatever perspective we're coming from. So it's really a game changer in the teams we've been able to work with.
If I can piggyback on something Evans just shared there. In the book, Solving the People Problem, we actually share a lot of data around research and studies, some of the stuff that we've done, but a lot of things that other people have done on other organizations. And one of the studies that really jumps out to us is the fact that around the world, over 50%, and in the United States, 62% of employees blame the negative impact of conflict that they experience in the workplace. They blame it on personality styles. They basically the differences of personalities. And what we would argue is it's not the existence of different personalities. Last I checked, we all have a personality. So if that's the source of a problem, we're in trouble. But what really, the way we boil it down is the source of the problem is the fact that people don't have a good understanding of the differences, and they don't honor those differences. So DISC, the connection to mindfulness is perfect, because if you can understand your own kind of DISC style and other people's DISC style, you gain the knowledge, the ability to be more mindful. And what we see in the organizations that embrace this kind of stuff, that conflict that they experience based on personality differences, it goes way down, because personality differences now become a source of value. It's a source, it's a source of diversity and diversity of thought and diversity of perspective. And if we're going to be working together, either as business partners or, a parent working with the school or administrators trying to figure things out, getting different points of view and different perspectives, that's going to help us come to an ultimately better outcome, whatever it is we're trying to work on.
Yeah, I think I also wonder, in terms of assigning or delegating responsibilities and tasks, whether knowing your own DISC style helps you, or as Aubrey mentioned in hiring, when I used the DISC, I was on a team and we knew what each other's style was. And so when we were looking at who was going to do what, the person who is the S, which is me, is somebody who kind of raises their hand and says, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And I knew that that was my style. So I knew that I had to kind of keep that under restraint. And the person who's the I, who's the person who's the life of the party kind of person, that's the person who planned the party. So does it also help you in that way to sort of help you with your responsibilities or hiring?
A little bit, but I want to be really careful about this. While DISC helps us understand kind of our comfort zone, if you will, kind of what's most natural to us, it is not a limitation. It does not say what I can or can't do in any way, shape, or form. And I'll give you an example from one of our corporate clients. I was working with an actuarial firm, and the CEO asked kind of the same question. I'm going to hire actuaries. So I need to hire, in this case, C's, or conscientiousness people, really focused on accuracy is kind of one of their big drivers. And I had to point out to them that actually several of their top actuaries were I's. Style doesn't control it. Style says, here's my comfort zone. Those actuaries who are I's can be great actuaries. They may go about it differently. They may communicate about it a little bit differently. But style isn't a limitation. There's things that are going to be easier for us and things that might take a little bit more energy. But if our interest is in those things that take more energy, if that's what really it makes me excited, I'm willing to put in that work, and I can be very successful there. So I would never want this to be kind of putting somebody into a box. It's, hey, here are things we can do to communicate a little bit more, but I want to understand what else there is, right? Personality isn't everything, right? There's also what the skills I've learned, what my background and experience are, et cetera. So I just want to be a little bit careful about that.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That makes a lot of sense, for sure.
I will say, Tara, based on what you were talking about, if you understand your own DISC style, does that allow you to be more mindful and potentially more effective? I would argue it absolutely does. I'll say for me. So I happen to be an I type. So I is the influence type. People of my style tend to be pretty enthusiastic. We tend to be pretty action oriented. We tend to come up with a lot of ideas, and I fit that to the T. As Evans will tell you, I just keep going with the ideas. Hey, here's a great idea. Hey, here's a great idea. And it was through my deepening understanding of DISC and kind of connecting it with emotional intelligence that I realized, along with some input from some others as we're doing this work, that while my ideation is a very valuable thing for the role that I'm in, kind of thinking about the future and what's the next round of products and services that we need to create, it can also be a detriment when I overuse it. Because one of our team members at one point said, one of the things you do to slow this down is you're always ideating. We start working on a project, probably on something that you thought of, that you suggested that we do. And then we're working on the details, trying to get it done. And here comes Brett thinking about, hey, what about this? And she's like, you can't do that. You got to let us focus. And I would argue that it's because I became more self-conscious and more mindful around kind of my own style, my own communication practices, that I really recognized, there's some times where things that might normally be a strength, if I overuse them or use them in the wrong situations, they can actually be a detriment. So a similar thing, you can tell I'm kind of a little on that fast pace, a little energetic side. I work with a lot of people that are much more on the reserve side. And I've really recognized that I have the ability to overpower those people. And that's never been my intention to do that. But I will tell you, back when in the early days out of undergrad, when I was doing financial sales, as I was working with clients that when they started getting a little more reserved, the first thing that went into my emotionally unintelligent brain was, I guess I'm not turning it on enough. Maybe if I just turn it on a little bit more, I can get them to engage. So it's like exactly the wrong approach, right? So yeah, a long way to say, Tara, that yeah, if we can get a better understanding of our own style, our own preferences, we gain all kinds of ability to interact with people in more effective ways.
Yeah, for sure. We have a few questions that we ask all of our guests on the show. So, what are the most important things that you do to grow professionally and personally? You can each answer if you like. You can take turns.
Sure. For me, it's podcasts and books. I'm one of those who generally has 5 or 6 books in process at any one time. So those are two of my big ones. And then for me, growing and developing is also making sure that I actually take a little bit of time away and take that time to refresh a little bit. For me, I have a granddaughter, which a great joy, and my 2 girls. So a little bit of time with family, a little bit of time to actually decompress so that when I'm focusing, I can actually focus.
And I would echo that, finding new sources for new ideas. I'm more of an audiobook guy. Evans likes to see it on the page. I like to hear it through the ears, but same general idea there. And especially today, I think podcasts have become such a fantastic tool for us. I'm so excited that you guys now have this podcast because you're able to target an audience with relevant information to them. So as a podcast listener, I always go out and seek different kinds of podcasts that I can hear and gain new insights from different people. And it doesn't have to be just the most well-known leader in the world that you're getting information from. You can get all kinds of really great information from people that you would never hear of unless you tuned into a podcast or two.
What did we do before podcasts?
Oh, right.
I don't remember that world, but I love what you all said. And especially, also taking the time away to refresh your brain and to be mindful and spend time with those that you love. It's really important. And it was great to hear you all say that. As we're moving into our second question, what is one of the most important things that we can do to be more mindful? So our audience, what would your recommendations be?
I would say that everybody should take that time to self-reflect. Going back to that story that about my own journey of kind of recognizing when my strength becomes a weakness. If we all took a little bit of time to try to put ourselves in other people's shoes and kind of reflect on, how do other people interpret me? If you can have a little bit of mindfulness to be able to do that, that's going to help you a great deal.
Okay, I'm going to actually hit a really similar point, but in a little bit different way, I think. When we first wrote this book, we actually had a different subtitle to it. We ended up with Solving the People Problem, Essential Skills You Need to Lead and Succeed in Today's World. Our original subtitle for Solving the People Problem was, And You're the Problem. Our editor told us that may sound nice and it may be correct, but you're not going to sell any books. So we chose to change the subtitle. But there's truth to that statement. So I would say, one of the things that I always look at is, especially when something doesn't go quite right, I always start with, how could I have contributed to that? Because that's where the learning can happen. And it's also the only thing I can actually change is how I interact in a situation. So what I found is when I start from there, rather than start by pointing a finger in any other direction, there's always new learning that happens there. And I learn a little bit about myself and a little bit about how I'm interacting with others. So kind of very similar to Brett's point, but I kind of take it from that perspective of, I'm the only tool I have to improve outcomes. So that's where I need to start my query.
Yeah, I think that's really important. As someone who's hard on herself, I will say there's also a balance there too, because when you put it all on yourself, I think you can also sometimes be too hard on yourself and take too much. So I don't know how that balance fits in, but I think a lot of it has to do with being mindful enough to understand yourself and what the limiting talk that you give yourself sometimes. So those are great tips. Thank you for sharing them.
Sure.
I'm going to do some rapid fire questions now. So we're going to kind of go through these quickly. If you could put one book as mandatory reading in the school curriculum, what would it be?
I
High
got
school
this one.
curriculum. High school. Yeah.
I got this one.
Okay.
Solving the people problem. Essential skills you need to lead and succeed in
I
today's
walked right into
workplace.
that.
It's a fantastic read. Now, I will actually say, of course, I'm going to say that, but I will say it has been an Amazon bestseller. And here's some social proof. Entrepreneur Magazine named it the #1 must-read book for 2021.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
don't trust me, but trust Entrepreneur Magazine.
All
And your
right.
Amazon reviews are pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we actually we've been fortunate to have some people getting on there and sharing a little bit about what they've learned. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that.
That's great.
So if I could add a title, how could I follow that one up?
I know. Well, that
don't
was
really
a plant.
know.
That was not a plant. We do ask that of everyone.
No, it's a great question, but I'll take what we didn't write, because I think it's one that's really important for a high school audience to think about, and that would be Mindset by Carol Dweck. I think that's a really impactful book for people to understand that you do have the power. You are never stuck with who you are, and your outlook, your mindset, and how you look at that is going to go a great deal of the way toward what you can do in your life. So I think it's a very empowering read, and a lot of her research is around children and that impact. So I think for a high school level person, I think that's a really empowering book.
Excellent.
Yeah, Evans, I would have to agree with you. I love that book. And I love what you said about mindset and about how we can approach each situation with that. I mean, it all comes down to what's going on inside our head and the mindset we choose, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that book. And I'm going to ask you another question. So what is one app you couldn't live without?
Oh, Zoom. For the last year, I mean, we talked about this. I don't know how I could have done anything in the last year without Zoom. I mean, and I've had weird Zoom calls. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I led a call of 48 people on Zoom. I was doing some training and I lost power 5 minutes before it started. But with the modern miracle of technology, I mean, I hotspotted, had enough battery in the computer, luckily, and everything was hooked up through the computer. There was no lights, and everything got dark because it was a very overcast day. So my wife was running around the house grabbing candles, and we lit candles all around the table. So I did a Blair Witch Project Zoom call with 48 people. It was, Zoom has enabled us to do things that I don't know how I could have handled it in any other way, or how many of us could have handled a lot of what's happened over the last year.
Yeah, thank goodness for Zoom. And that's amazing. I could just picture it. I was visualizing like all the candles around and like it was dimly lit, but probably the ambiance was quite nice.
Yeah, a little flickering light. I did hold a candle up just below my chin for a minute, just to get that really spooky flavor. Yeah, an interesting meeting.
Another app that I think is very helpful goes back to something we were talking about a little earlier. Aubrey, you made the comment, what do we do before podcasts? I like to use an app called Downcast for my podcast. It's a great tool to organize. And one of the things probably in line with my DISC style, when I listen to a podcast, I never listen to it on regular speed. I always click it up until I can just make it out. And I go pull it back one notch. That's where I listen to things. Anyway, Downcast allows me to organize the podcast and adjust the playback speeds, which is pretty important for me.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, I've tried that. There are some podcasts where the guest speaks slowly enough that I can speed them up, but it stresses me out to try to speed them up. It makes me feel hurried.
Meanwhile, I'm thinking I might be an I. I've got to totally take.
Yeah, you're definitely an I. Oh, you are, no question about it.
Because I'm identifying. I'm like, I speed up the podcast too, and I need to look at this app.
You are definitely an I.
Hilarious. Nice. Love it.
We'll talk after this, Aubrey. We'll take care of it.
Next rapid fire question. What are you reading right now?
So I'm reading a book called Everyday People, Extraordinary Leadership. This is by a couple of guys, Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, who happen to be a couple of mentors of ours. These two have been a fixture in the leadership development space for over 30 years. They wrote a book called The Leadership Challenge, which is one of the seminal books on leadership. It really outlines a 30 plus year study on leadership that they've been doing. And Everyday People, Extraordinary Leadership is the latest book that they've put out. It just came out in the last handful of months. So I'm just starting to dig into that and really enjoying it. There's a lot of really good stories and a lot of good insights about how to become the best leader you can be.
Super. I'll keep my list short. I am reading that book as well. And it
Oh.
does a beautiful job of bringing out the fact that leadership is not a position. It's a way in which we interact with other people to get great things done. I'm also reading a book called First Principles by Thomas Ricks that's about how the Greek and Roman philosophies were used by the founding fathers here in the country. And one other would be Cal Newport's World Without Email.
Oh my gosh, I'm putting these all on my list. I love all these topics, like the leadership, all of them. And I have not read Cal Newport. Is that a new book or?
That's Cal Newport's new book.
Okay, great.
I'm reading that in a book club actually with a bunch of people overseas. So
that's a fiction book, right? World Without Email. That's a novel.
That is not a novel. His last book I really loved, which was, oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank on the name now. It was really about stepping away from technology. Cal Newport does a lot of work about being able to be creative and being able to have the time to do deep thought.
Did he write Deep Work? Is that his book?
Deep Work is his as well. He's one of my favorites.
We always joke that my bookshelf keeps growing and it takes over rooms. And so now it will be extended because I will be looking at these titles. So
I've started doing all of these from this room because there just aren't as many books. The other room looked really crowded.
So you've selected the few you will display. Well, that's great. Well, I have our last question. What is one great piece of advice you'd like to leave us with?
I actually have something that I think could be very helpful for people listening, and that it's connected to the solving the people problem journey that we've been on. As part of writing the book, Evans and I did some research and created an emotional intelligence survey that is now available on solvingthepeopleproblem.com. And we'd be glad to give it to your listeners absolutely free. If they want to go to solvingthepeopleproblem.com and click on the What's My DISC EQ link in the menu items, they can go there, they enter the access code of mindful, and they'll be able to take this emotional intelligence survey that is not just going to give them a score on how do they compare to everybody else related to their self-awareness and awareness of other styles, but even more importantly, it's going to give them a bunch of tips and tailored advice around what they can do to make themselves just a little bit more effective as they communicate with other people. So I'd say take the emotional intelligence survey and use it as a mirror and see what you can learn from it.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you all are offering that. Thank you so much. I think our listeners will really enjoy it and get a lot of it.
Sure. So I'll keep mine short, but I'm going to have actually two pieces to this. The first is that you need to be able to honor the differences. So my advice is look for those differences because that is where we learn, that is where we grow. When I hear a different perspective, my first thought should be, that's wonderful. You have a different way of looking at this. What could I learn? What might I be missing? And at the same time, we also need to be able to give other people as well as ourselves some grace. It's really easy to think we have to do this perfectly. We're all on a journey. It's part of becoming more emotionally intelligent is giving us the permission to learn along the way. It's not about the destination. It's also about our journey. And the beauty is that we can all become more emotionally intelligent, work better with more and more people in our lives. And frequently what we find is that those sparks that grow that are not always comfortable at the time. So learn to kind of look for those differences. And when you find yourself becoming defensive, kind of ask a question, see if there's something you can learn along the way.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, defensive is, we could go off on that for a really long time too. I've thought about that a lot over the past year, but such great advice. And thank you so much offering our guests your survey. We will be putting that in the show notes for sure. Where can people find you online?
So the easiest place is going to go to solvingthepeopleproblem.com. You can reach out to me there, Evans there. We also have other content. If you like the things that we've been talking about, there's a bunch of other information there. You can also find both of us on LinkedIn. So I'm Brett M. Cooper and Evans is just Evans Kerrigan on LinkedIn.
Great.
The first
thank
name like
you.
Evans, I didn't need a middle initial to separate
That's
myself.
right. Yeah.
It has been so much fun chatting with you all, and I've learned so much. So thank you so much for being on our show. We've very much enjoyed learning from you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us on the Mindful School Marketing Podcast.
We'd love it if you pop into iTunes and leave a review, 5-star preferred. Let us know how you like the show. It helps us improve what we're doing and helps others find us too.